Last night we were watching a program. I think it's a what's the NBC streaming channel? NBC related Peacock. It's a Peacock streaming program called Teacup. You heard of Teacup?
Don't think I have.
It's a suspense/horror series. So I didn't see the Wolves get what appeared to be hopelessly behind against the vastly improved Houston Rockets early. By the time I did pick up the game, we had gotten back into the ball game. It was nip and it was tuck. And then ultimately, after the Rockets had gone cold to help us get back into it in the fourth, we went exceedingly cold in the overtime period, and we end up losing our third in a row. A cacophony of boos at several points.
And we're out of the NBA Cup now.
That's official. Correct. No chance at redemption, even if we knock off the Clippers Friday night, I think, is our next home game, right? We've got the Kings tonight, the reeling Kings. I think they've lost 4 in a row. And they're down with us in the standings at this point. But I saw a decent amount of the fourth quarter and the overtime period, and then I saw a lot of the highlights and the lowlights, because everything these days is available to you if you're so interested. It all gets distilled, sometimes fairly, sometimes unfairly. So what are the Minnesota Timberwolves to do? Everybody's trying to figure out, is there a way out of the box? And if there is, what's the best way out of the box? There are probably no easy ways out of the box, but there are 3, I think, relatively easy things in the short run that I believe are essential to the Wolves getting themselves closer to that place where you say, well, maybe, because there sure as hell is still plenty of time. We haven't hit the 20-game mark, but we're close. When you hit the 20-game mark, that's a quarter of the season.
Yep.
It's hard to believe, but it's true. Even I can do that, Matt. That's an 82-game season. So, top of my list, number 1, non-negotiable. I would now say essential. And it was, I thought, written very effectively by Chris Hine in the Star Tribune. Play a point guard, whether he is experienced or green, almost every minute your team is on the floor. In other words, stop pretending that with Mike Conley either hurt or on the bench, that you can hand the ball to DiVincenzo, you can hand the ball to Anthony Edwards, you can hand the ball even to Julius Randle, and they'll be fine getting it up, not just getting it up the court, which obviously those guys can do, but also initiating the offense. That has to stop immediately. The Conley numbers speak for themselves. His individual statistics, not impressive. The team statistics in terms of offensive efficiency and victories, Conley's presence remains important, even when he's not individually shooting all that effectively. And when he's not on the court, stop pretending you can plug anybody else in there that were that versatile. Give the ball to the kid. Give the ball to Dilly. And this isn't just about, it's easy to get seduced by the sensational aspects of what his body and game represent, right? It's fun. It's exciting. It can also be a little bit too seductive where it leaves out some fundamental plays that he leaves on the table. I don't think the Wolves have a choice at this point at that position without any other pure point guards on this team. They have to live with some of the mistakes Dillingham offers, because what you are at least getting is a guy who is familiar with running an offense. He may not always make the perfect read, but he's familiar with doing it. So that means not putting him in only when Conley is hurt. As far as I'm concerned, that means he has to be the first point guard off the bench from this point forward, period, end of story. And you live with the bad, because the truth of the matter is it's bad enough with the other alternatives that you're using. We're going to get to that part in a minute. And yesterday, by the way, he ran things for, I think he had 7 assists.
7.
He ran it well. We all know about the fact that he can, there is nobody on this team, including Anthony Edwards, who can separate from their defender like Dilly. Nobody. He's got that ability. He's got to learn other stuff, and I saw him get burned a couple times defensively, but let's be honest. Anthony Edwards ain't playing. No one's playing that well defensively on this team. What's the distinction? So to me, that's where it starts.
And he has the best energy on the team.
There's not any doubt about that, too. So he is your backup point guard. In other words, when Conley, as far as I'm concerned, comes off, if he starts and you take him out at the 6-minute mark, which has been customary, then Dillingham should come in at that point. I also thought Finchie made a mistake last night. He gets into that bit of, the kid was good, but now we're in OT, and I don't know, he's making a couple mistakes, and he waited until, I think it was like 40 seconds to go to bring him back.
Yep, in overtime.
Absolutely deserved to play more in that game. Period, end of story. To me, that's the first thing. Number 2, tell Dante DiVincenzo to worry about nothing but shooting, getting open, and guarding. Tell him he doesn't have to worry about initiating the offense because we're putting it in the hands of the kid. If we had another option, I'd consider that too, but we don't. We don't have another option. So you strip it down with DiVincenzo. We know he's a better shooter than he's been shooting, right? It looks like he's lost some of his swagger and some of his confidence. He had a couple of bad turnovers. I think that's when the booing got the worst. We had a bad turnover, I think, near midcourt.
Yep.
So strip it down with him. Play off the ball. Get open. Keep taking your shots if they're open, but in the flow. And that's number 3. Start running some freaking sets. I know Finchie's loath to do that. He likes free flow, but there's nothing free flow about this offense right now. End the endless isolate. Right now, last night, what we saw definitely late were isolation plays for both Edwards and for Randall. It's not a good look. It's not serving. I don't even think it serves either player, even though both are capable of breaking down defenses. And when obviously the shot clock is running down, that's what some of the best players and the best teams do. But that should be the last resort. Run some stuff. I saw too many times where literally there's 5 guys not moving on this court. Either Randall or Ant has the ball dribbling it out on the wing.
Yep.
And I see literally, and they're spread out nicely, but I don't see any movement. They're all stationary, waiting for Edwards to do, or Randall to do whatever either one of those wants to do. To me, those, I guess you could say 4 things, and the ISO would be the 4. You're not going to end the ISO, but make it a lot less an important part of what you're doing, and see where you are at that point. Like I said, especially with DiVincenzo, where you stop pretending he can do because we were all saying it, and like free safety, well, he can do everything. We don't need a backup point guard. He can initiate fine. He can run it fine. He can make things happen for other people. He probably can. He did a lot of stuff for the Knicks last year, but I think for the Knicks, he was at his best just scoring and defending and not worrying about other responsibilities. Then you could build it back up maybe at some point. But to me, you do those simple things, you at least open the door a little bit to finding out exactly what's going on. And I'll quickly add, that probably means less playing time for several people. Nikhil included, and I've liked Nikhil at times. He didn't look particularly good running the offense yesterday either. So to me, that's where you start on what was another very troubling night in which the Wolves did not meet Houston's effort, especially defensively. That's how we ended up being down as far as we were in that game, and that's why ultimately we got exactly what we deserved, despite coming back another loss. How many shots did Jaden McDaniels have? Was it 15, 17, whatever it was?
Didn't make enough of them.
It's too many. I don't know what you do. I've said this before. I'll say it again. Part of your problem offensively is if you want to say, well, just Jaden, don't worry about your offense. I don't think you can survive in the National Basketball Association 2024 with 2 limited offensive players in your starting lineup. That's 1, 2. That might be 2. If you're the Boston Celtics, that's 2 too many. But you might be able to get away with it with 4 out of 5. 3 out of 5 ain't enough. So I don't know what the answer is there. It's clear teams are saying we'll take our chances with him shooting.
Exactly right.
Right?
Exactly right.
We're going to give up. They've got a couple guys who can make stuff happen that we're going to give extra attention to. And by the way, Randall had another one of those games where he had some great moments. He had some awful offensive moments yesterday, and he had some more defensive moments where he was completely lost. So that's enough.
It's not so much lost as not interested.
Well,
there's so many bad
clips. I think
clips.
it's both. I think it's some both. But there are some where it just looks like, okay, somebody's out there. Okay, well, I'll kind of come halfway. I don't want to call him a 6'9" D-Lo because that's unfair to Julius Randle, in my opinion, on the basis of the breadth of his career. But sometimes it has that same feel. It does, where you go, well, where are you? I mean, what are you thinking? And then he'll have 2 possessions where he's like, okay, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and my arms, and I'm going to get my hands on my knees, and I'm down in the guard position, and he'll do a couple good things there. The problem with that is that it has to happen a lot more consistency. And people who I trust, I haven't noticed this as much as others apparently say that right now, Anthony Edwards' perimeter defense is not very good. That it's not, again, he'll make the occasional steal, but it's also not consistent. So you got leaks pretty much all over the board right now.
Off the ball, his defense has not been good all year. On the ball, there was a clip last night where he's trying to guard Van Fleet. Or Van Vliet? Something like that.
Whatever it is, yeah.
Everybody knows who he is.
He didn't get suspended, by the way. Funny.
Good player.
Didn't get suspended after he basically poked the eye of an official. Well, not quite.
It was the NBA Cup. You can't suspend somebody for the NBA Cup.
It is,
It's like Jamal Murray couldn't get suspended for the playoffs. And Randall had no interest in the screen and roll that Fred and Anthony were involved in. This is the third quarter. And McDaniels, I feel bad for Jaden in a way because I still don't know how that 3 didn't go down in the right corner.
Yes, there were a couple of shots that were in and out. Didn't Edwards have one?
At the buzzer.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I don't feel as bad for Ant because what really bothered me about last night, Dan, is you mentioned the Dillingham part of it. And Dilly changed the entire vibe of the game, so much so that Randall was all over the place, defensively and on the offensive glass. All of a sudden, Randall was playing like this was his last game ever, or that he was promised a max contract if they won. And Dilly changed everything. They take the lead. There's 3 minutes to go, and there's this one play, and I meant to watch it back, because from the 3-minute mark to the end of overtime, the Wolves scored 3 points. And I think Edwards was like 0 for 9.
That's correct.
And after the whole pace of the game had changed, and Dilly's flying in the lane, he's got the floater, he's got the 7 assists, it's a great lob to Rudy, the building is on fire. They get a stop. Dilly and Ant are by the wing. Dilly's like bouncing, like he's ready to get the ball and go. Ant gets the outlet. And from that point on, the ball was sticky. I know Dilly had a turnover.
Well, not only was the ball sticky, to your point, Dillingham, it was almost like I'm glad you brought that up because the way I took it almost was a little bit of, okay, kid, you've been good.
1,000%.
But this is my ball now.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, there again, if you're the head coach of this team, you have every right there to say, Anthony, we're not changing what we're running. You're going to get the ball. Dilly is not going to forget about you. Your teammates never forget about you. So it's probably going to come back to you, but let's keep running what we're doing because it
got
did,
us in the game.
And it became not just that the ball was sticky, it's the bouncing, and I'm looking for. So it's a great point. I think it was so clear, and again, I can't prove that Edwards said that's enough, kid.
No, but that's what it felt like.
That's how it came off.
It felt like a pecking order bit on the closer.
Change in the offensive rhythm that previously was based on what? Him bounce, his body bouncing, him getting from point A to point B, which does what? That's what moves people around. That's what almost forces people. With him, you got to move because he's going to get it in either in the lane or he's going to get it close to the lane. And if you keep moving, he's not stupid. He knows his best chance for playing time early is not scoring.
Right.
It is distributing. And he's doing enough of both to say, well, yeah, you can trust me with that even if I'm going to make some mistakes.
And Houston at that point was dead.
Yeah.
They weren't making anything.
Well, they were missing everything.
The Wolves were cleaning up the rebounds. Like everything that we've wanted from this team that they haven't gotten consistently was on display for however long that stretch was. And it just struck me as I was watching it live because and they were contested shots. There was a turnover by midcourt. Then Randall got into it. I was stunned because that surprised me because Anthony's a really good teammate, right? We think he's good at pumping people up. Yeah. Obviously, he's been pumping J-Mac up. He's been trying to pump Randall up the whole bit. Says he loves playing with Dante. That was not a good move.
There was even in one of those possessions, Dillingham moves over as if, okay, are you going to give me the ball here to get it started again? And Edwards completely ignored him.
Yeah.
As if, and look,
it bothered me.
That's been the way they've been successful much of the time. But I think given what you saw, part of, to me, great coaching and even great basketball playing intelligence is what? Well, what's working right now? And we got to go with this kid. And again, it's not like I'm not going to get the ball.
Correct.
Edwards is going to get the ball. He's not going to be afraid to give the ball up at all. So that's the stuff, again, is I think we all agree Finchie's done a nice job here. But that's stuff where you say, well, you got to be more declarative and more emphatic and really, almost impose your coaching will, even though you're not a guy who wants to do that, to say, no. Whatever they were calling up till then, they should have continued to do it. It wouldn't have guaranteed victory, but you had, at that point, much, much better flow.
Time now for the Vikings Report on The Fan, presented by Miller Lite. Viking safety Cam Bynum joins Barrero next after this from Miller Lite. It's time for another edition of Mace in Your Face. Now, along with college football immortality, Glen Mason, here's Dan Barrero.
Kerry Limo brings us, as always, the redoubtable one, Glen Mason. Not in studio today. He joins us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline as he prepares for a big Thanksgiving feast. We've talked Thanksgiving with you before. Is it are you a traditionalist when it comes to the foods? Do you like to branch out a little bit? What is the Mason tradition when it comes to Thanksgiving fare?
No, I don't branch out at all because turkey is one of my favorite dinners. You get turkey and mashed potatoes and gravy and the stuffing, cranberry sauce, vegetable, apple pie, pumpkin pie. I mean, if I was sentenced to death and had one last meal, that's what I'm asking for, buddy.
I don't disagree with you at all on that. I'm a comfort food. I could eat turkey 8 days a week. I really think and I get sick of it probably eventually, but not for a long time. I'm with you 100%. Do you have a favorite stuffing?
I don't know. Whatever they put on my plate, I eat. I don't make any of it. I don't know. What's the choices?
Well,
sausage, stuffing.
To be honest with you, I'm not a great stuffing mind. There's a lot of different kinds of
options.
I don't eat stuffing at all.
Oh, it's my favorite.
I just do the turkey, mashed potatoes. I don't even and I only put gravy on the meat. I do not put gravy on the potatoes. Your thoughts?
I never met a stuffing I didn't like. Let me just put it that way.
All right, fair enough. That's good to know.
Hey, Dan, I just got to tell you something.
Yeah.
Happy Thanksgiving, by the way. But anyway, I had one of the best days today that I've had in a long, long time.
Is
Let me
that
explain.
Right?
Okay. I've been going to this dental hygienist in Edina at 44th Street Dental forever.
Okay.
Jenny, probably 25 years. Just a delightful person, a great hygienist. And one time, she mentioned to me she was taking a family trip to New Jersey, and she was going by Lake Mohawk. Had I ever been there? I said, are you kidding me? I said, when we were growing up as kids, my aunt and uncle had a place up on Lake Mohawk, and we grew up in the city, but, no air conditioning and no swimming pool, none of that stuff. So we periodically, as young kids, would get to go up there, and we loved that. And so anyway, today in New Jersey, my lovely sister, Linda, who you know, we decided to take a little trip down memory lane. So we got in the car and we drove up to Lake Mohawk, and I pull up to these people's house. And when I tell you that Doug and Marcia Benson are two of the nice people that I have ever met, okay, and invited us in. They have a home right there on the lake that was built in the 30s. And we sat there, well over an hour talking about Lake Mohawk, talking about this, talking about that. And you talk about a small world. Their son, Thor Benson, is the principal of Southwest Christian School and the head lacrosse coach. And I never met Thor, but if he's half as nice as his mom and dad, I got to go out there and meet the guy because they are just tremendous people.
You know, it occurs to me as you're telling that story that something's going on with you. Either you're living well or you have become incredibly fortunate here the last few years, because it seems like every time we talk, you're telling us about another adventure trip to an exotic island because of some cool people you met, and then your hygienist, this coincidence as well. It seems like you're on a roll where almost every week there's another Glen Mason experience with some great people that you get to hang with or you get to go on vacation with. What is going on? Did you just live right?
Dan, I think that's a great question or observation. I think because of my profession, I came in contact with a lot of people over the years. Some of them were great people, and maybe some of them weren't great people. And I never was able to differentiate between the two. But now that I've gone up in years and have a little bit more time, and, you go out of your way to, like I did, knock on the people's door and go in there and just sit for a better course of an hour and just enjoy people. No schedule, no rush, no agenda.
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't know how I could have taken an hour of my life and spent it any better than talking to those two wonderful people.
Well, you're stating the case for why retirement has been a good thing for you, right? Because I know sometimes you get a little bit bored, and sometimes you say, well, I miss this, miss that. But this is this is the beauty of retirement, because it gives you the opportunity to take advantage of these deals, these kinds of situations, where otherwise, if you were still in the meat grinder, worrying about the transfer portal, you'd have no chance to do it.
Well, there's one of my favorite sayings, Dan, that I've said for years and years and years, but I think as you get older, you start realizing it's not just a saying, it's something you ought to do. And I used to say all the time, life is not a dress rehearsal, because it's not.
No, you're right.
So anyway, when you, when the clock keeps ticking and you start thinking about when you're young, you got so much time, you don't know what to do with it. And you get older, you're not sure how much time you have left. And I'm not trying to be more, but I got a lot of time left. But if you feel like doing something, you better do it. You better have some fun, and you better not worry about all the little things, because they're little things. Yeah,
you're doing it. There's no question about that. My Hoosiers didn't do it, as you know. They had their showdown game with Ohio State. They end up, in terms of their own offense, they end up being pretty overmatched. They had one good drive early, nothing until then, very late in the ball game. So what's fair to conclude on the basis of the Ohio State-Indiana matchup? Did Ohio State expose Indiana to the point where you do not think they should be a legitimate in the conversation when it comes to the tournament? Do you think that's not fair to the Hoosiers? What did you take out of that matchup?
Well, if you remember a week ago, I said, they're going into Ohio Stadium exactly at the wrong time, because Ohio State will view them as a threat.
Yeah.
And, they're not going to sneak up on Ohio State. Those players are going to be wide-eyed and be watching film all week. And Ohio State, Indiana's got a good football team. They don't have the talent Ohio State has. I know that those recruiting rankings go out of thing, but I think Ohio State had 55 five-star players on their roster, and Indiana had none. Now that can be, misleading. But in saying that, I still think, I will defend them to the day, that they should still be in the college football playoff of 12 teams conversation based on this. I know a lot of people are taking shots at them, and in the next breath they'll say, well, Notre Dame should be in. No, why? I looked at strength of schedule. Indiana's strength of schedule is superior to Notre Dame. Indiana lost to Ohio State. Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois.
Good point.
So if these pundits are all saying, well, Notre Dame should be in, why? Because they're Notre Dame? Because Newt Rockne coached there and Indiana shouldn't be? I don't buy it. So if there's legitimacy in saying Notre Dame should be in, then Indiana should be in.
Yeah.
But at the same time, with the SEC guys, you'll see some guys down there, complaining. and they don't talk about Indiana or Notre Dame, but they'll bring up Boise, and Boise's got a real good football team. But they'll say, now, if Boise played in the SEC, what would their schedule be? And who knows? But I'd venture to say it wouldn't be very good. They wouldn't be in the college football playoff. So when you start saying this whole thing of 12-team playoff is supposed to get the best 12 teams in there, I'm not buying it under this system.
Well, I think the Indiana got a break that night because, speaking of the SEC teams, they keep losing, right? Alabama not only loses their third, so they're the third or fourth? I think third. They get killed. Ole Miss, I think, lost. So it's hard, I think, to take seriously some of the whining from the SEC when you got the number of 3 lost teams that you do in the SEC. That probably also, I think, kind of helped the Indiana cause. Let me ask you one other thing about protocol. Because you coach so long, I'm very curious to know whether this sort of thing would annoy you or you would just say it's not worth the difficulty. So, in the offseason, when Cignetti is hired by Indiana, he goes to that basketball game and says Purdue sucks and Ohio State sucks and everybody sucks and that sort of thing. Well, Ohio State scores a late touchdown. Their QB then's on the sidelines doing the old, like he's smoking a cigarette and then stamping it out for, Cignetti. And the implication also was that he was annoyed by the Cignetti bravado and the Ohio State sucks thing. So do you think, does Indiana have a right to be offended by that? Or do you say, well, no, if you're going to have the kind of swagger that Cignetti, the approach he takes, then you sort of got to take the medicine that the emotions being what they are, the other team and even some of the players in the other team, they're going to do those sorts of things.
Well, this comes in the category you used to ask me about that I get upset if somebody ran the score up.
Yes.
And I always said, hey, it's my job not to have that happen. And it's his job to do what he thinks is in the best interest of his team. So if people thought somebody was running up the score, I said, that's my fault.
Mm-hmm.
If I could have done something about it, I shouldn't. On the other hand, with Ohio State winning and doing what they're doing, my view to the team would have been, hey, guys, show some class.
Mm-hmm.
Would you? I mean, what is that proving? You play the game on the field for whatever it's worth, and if you win or you shake the guy's hand after, but don't do that. Don't give the critics or the naysayers, whatever you want to call it, a room to get in a debate. Have them evaluate your play, not your antics after it was over.
One of the more entertaining, maybe the most entertaining game of the Gophers season ends with the Gophers losing to Penn State 26-25. I don't know how much of it you got to see. It was a very entertaining game, but ultimately the Gophers ended up losing that ball game. And, of course, Penn State ended up holding on to the ball, including one of the more successful fake punts you'll see. I mean, I think they ended up 25, 27 yards on that play to keep the ball from the Gophers, who I think were in position to think, well, all we need now is a field goal. So in your career, how often were you victimized by a fake punt? Not one that you tried, but one that was tried on you. And what was your philosophy on that? Because there are some people who said in that situation, the Gophers should have been better prepared for that possibility. The old do the safe punt thing where maybe you got one return guy back, but you handled it at the line of scrimmage almost as if you're going to be sure that you're prepared for any kind of a fake. What's fair in that situation?
Fair? Yeah, that's where you pick it on. I got to keep reminding you of that.
Yes, that's true.
I really, off the top of my head, can't remember when I was ever victimized by a fake punt. There was a couple times when I victimized the opponent, though. I can tell you that. Yeah. Most notably against Oklahoma one year when I was at Kansas, tie score, both teams undefeated. We got a 3rd and 7 coming off our own 32-yard line, and I ran a fake punt for 47 yards. And there's a whole other story behind that I don't have time to tell you. But one of the things I used to do, more than anything, I used to play punt safe a lot.
Yeah, there you go.
And I used to base it on what I used to worry about a lot of times, not so much that the team, would run a fake, but I didn't want to rough the punter either, So I'm thinking on the game, I'm in the case of this game, I just want to get the ball back. If I get the ball back, I got a pretty darn good chance, I think, of winning the game, tying the game, whatever it may be,
Yep.
Whereas the other hand of that, if I think, well, I'm down by 14, time's running out, well, I'm going to go after this sucker because if I don't block it, I got no chance. If you get my drift. So, I'm not trying to second guess PJ or anything, but I think old Coach Mason would have been in punt safe there.
They call that punt safe, right? That's the formation we're talking about. That's the term for it. That's what I was looking for, exactly.
And you don't worry about the return.
Yes, exactly.
You don't worry about the fake.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't worry about the block. You worry about the fake. You don't even rush.
Yep.
And no one's even going downfield holding guys up because you don't want the ball going to go off one of your return guys, any of that stuff.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. And then obviously,
let me just say this though, okay?
Yes.
I think that, I'm not very critical a lot of times. If Penn State is the fourth rated team in this country, I'll eat your hat. I have not impressed with them. They haven't beat anybody. And I know that, and I'm not trying to make this personal, but some of these announcers on where they sing the praises of a guy all the time, and I'm talking about the head coach of Penn State, that's a blue blood. That's a half school.
Yeah.
And when you're 1-15 against top 5 opponents and you've lost to Ohio State 8 years in a row, you tell me who they've beat. I don't know who they've beat. To say that they're the fourth ranked team in the country, I just don't buy it.
The Gophers will wrap up the season Friday morning here on the Fan, a Black Friday matchup against the slumping Wisconsin Badgers. Let me ask you, I know you love hypotheticals. You love them. You relish them. You revel in them.
I do now. I didn't like when I was coaching.
Well, that's it. All right, so I'm going to give you one. Let's say Minnesota goes to Madison and loses. They will have finished the regular season with a 6-6 record. And if in that eventuality, I think this is a swing and miss season because I factor in a few things here. It looks like you do have this year, it's only for the 1 year, a legitimate passing quarterback, right? You had a legitimate running back. Now, he was hurt for part of the season, but he's a damn good running back. You had a season in which you didn't have to play Ohio State. You didn't have to play Oregon. You didn't even have to play Indiana, which sounds crazy, but this year they've been a really good team. And you finished 6-6. To me, that's leaving too much on the table. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it is. When I look at this season in totality, and you can look back, and I would have to think that the two games that you lay away thinking about is the North Carolina game with the missed field goals,
yes,
and then the Rutgers game. Because all of a sudden you're sitting here with 8 wins right now, with
Very
the
different
opportunity to go over to Madison and get a 9th win. 9 wins, you'd say, I don't care who I played, that's a darn good season. But I think right now, 6 wins, you're going to go to a bowl. What bowl? I don't know. It wouldn't be the one that they'd like to go to. But I think if you go over there and you beat Wisconsin, which is very beatable, obviously, then you can say, it was a good season. If you lose, even though you got 6 wins, you can go bowl, it's kind of, it was a season. So that's the way I view it.
Should PJ be interested in the North Carolina job?
Why?
Just asking.
I don't know why. I mean, he's making a lot of money. I guess he should. That's the way it is anymore in college football. But I don't know. It's I think the commitment that PJ has at the University of Minnesota right now is unparalleled. When you look at that stadium, when you look at the new facilities that they have there, and it seems like they give them a lot of money to go recruiting and fly jets and all that kind of stuff. I don't know why you'd leave a Big Ten school where you think you have a legitimate chance to compete, where they have a big, huge TV contract, and go to the ACC. I don't buy it.
What if PJ's agent calls up Coyle and says, "Look, they got serious interest in us, and they're being very aggressive with this. We need you to do something to sweeten the pot." Would you do it? Would you counsel Mark Coyle to do it, or you say, God bless you?
Well, the first thing you got to think, is it legitimate?
Well,
you know, it's really easy for these agents to call up all the time, and if you don't think it's just happening it happens with the players are doing it. The players all have agents, and now all of a sudden the agent calls up the head coach. Hey, your guy has a real good season and he really likes it there, but hey, they're putting more money on the table. What are you going to do? You're going to have to up the ante, or he's going to go. I guess the first thing I would do, if that was a situation, if I was the AD, which I'm not, I'd go and sit down and say, wait a minute, first I'm going to ask you, do you think you have a better chance of being successful at North Carolina than you do Minnesota? And if he said yes, I'd say, well, then you ought to go. Because if that's the case, I don't care how much money you're going to pay him, he's probably going to go. And if he says, no, I got a better situation here, well, then you get in talking situation, you say, well, are you really going to go to a situation for, $25,000 more, or whatever it is, and you have a less of a chance to win? I don't think so.
I like the way you think. Real quick before we wrap things up, Mace in Your Face, brought to you by our good friends at Kerry Limo. Ben Gessling coming up.
And let me tell you, Kerry Limo, I had an early morning flight. I'm talking about not even the crack of dawn, 0 dark 30. And that Kerry car was there bright and early, sitting in my driveway, dependable like you can't believe.
They're always there. Did you hear did the Daniel Jones move make it all the way to New Jersey? Are you aware of the Vikings signing Daniel Jones?
Kidding? Where am I?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Out here right away, all the Giants fans,
that's true.
They're saying, wait a minute. You paid Daniel Jones the money, and you had to let Saquon Barkley go because you couldn't pay him. So he goes to the Eagles, and he's a superstar. And now you don't even have Daniel Jones. Who's making the decisions with the Giants? But I don't know. The thing about it is, sometimes you're just at the wrong place.
Yeah. And
as you know, Dan, New York is a tough place to play. You know what I mean? The pressure on you, if you're the quarterback or you're Aaron Judge or Derek Jeter and those guys, the pressure on you is almost to the point where you can't breathe. He gets a fresh start. It seems like Kevin O'Connell likes him. And if he didn't like him, he wouldn't bring him in there, because if he's a bust, someone will get the criticism.
Yeah. I like the way Trent Tucker has discussed playing in New York back when he played for the Knicks. He's basically said it can be, at its worst, as you said, the toughest place in the world to play, but at its best, he said there's nothing like it. They will love you like they'll love you very few other places. There's no in between, basically, right? It's sort of that feast or famine thing. So it can be brutal, but it can also be absolutely wonderful, is the way he put it. If you're in the good graces, New York's not a bad place to play.
Well, I always said about Joe Mauer, who was a great star for the Twins, and that discussion when he won the batting title, wherever he won, and the Yankees were going after him. If he'd have gone to the Yankees and had the same career and was making all that money, hitting 8 home runs a year, oh my God, it would have. No one understands what he would have went through. He would have got booed every time he came up to the plate. Brutal is not the word for it.
No, there's a different word that we probably can't use on the radio. So you got a big Thanksgiving tomorrow. So you'll do the tradition of you'll be feasting, and you'll be watching plenty of football as well. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. There's a couple college games on. Pro games on tomorrow. One
That's
is
true.
the Giants are playing. That'll be really good. But it'd be interesting to watch, and I think the NFL does this on purpose. Green Bay playing the Dolphins in Lambeau, night game this time of year.
Yes.
And it's probably going to be pretty cold.
That's it. You're 100% right. And then don't forget.
Might be cold in Wisconsin, too, huh?
Yeah, it should be. Chilly, right, Guardsy? I think is the plan. The lid lifter's really good, too. It's my Chicago Bears in Detroit against the Lions.
Yeah.
No, maybe not so good.
Well,
I don't know.
The Bears are getting better, though. I watched a little bit of that game, and Williams, he's coming on. He's, if they get things worked out pretty good, they could be a dangerous team.
There's no question about that. On that note, we'll let you go. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Wish you were here, and we hope to see your cheery face soon.
I will be there next Wednesday.
Outstanding. We'll talk then. Thanks, Mace.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Safe travels. That is Glen Mason, brought to you by Carey Limo. We are done at 5:30 today. Vikings programming followed by your Minnesota Wild here on the Fan against the Buffalo Sabres. How about some football talk? Ben Gessling's been all over the Daniel Jones story today. We'll see what he makes of it, how quickly he thinks Jones might be the backup, because to me that's the key question. And we'll get to a lot of other things, previewing Vikings versus the Arizona Cardinals. All of that is next.
Daniel will add, hopefully, Friday morning we'll add Daniel into the mix. And, I talked a little bit the other day after Kevin's question, where I've always been a fan. Love, really like the person, the human being, the makeup, and then the player, Daniel Jones. I think there's so much out in front of him that are going to be really good things that we get to personally be a part of, and I can't wait to work with him.
Kevin O'Connell confirming that Danny Dimes is on his way to Minnesota. I think he's going to arrive here on Friday to help us break it all down. Ben Gessling joins us via the Connecticut Water Systems hotline. Ben's appearances, as always, brought to you by our good friends at Standard Heating and Air Conditioning. In fact, I just had them out earlier this week to get the old winter furnace check, which I highly recommend. They are very diligent and very good at that, and extremely reasonable as well. Gessling, the deal is done. I maintain that the question that intrigues me the most isn't the future, because it's fairly obvious why the Vikings might be interested in hedging their bets and giving themselves another option for next season. What interests me the most is how quickly you believe that Danny Dimes could be the number 2 quarterback right behind Sam Darnold for this season. What do you think?
I think it's going to be interesting to watch that. I mean, I don't think they're going to rush it, but at the same time, if he shows that he picks up the offense fast enough and gets ready, I don't think it's impossible that, come playoff time or something, he is in that mix. I think a lot of it will just depend on how they feel about him in practice. We won't have a great gauge of it because I don't think we'll see him in games for a while, but I think that's a possibility for the playoffs. And the other thing to keep in mind is if he, and this is a little wonky, but if he gets on the active roster for one game this season, he is eligible to get them a compensatory pick in 2026 if he would sign somewhere else, or at least offset maybe one of the free agents they might sign next year. I mean, all of that stuff is further down the road, but there is a level that helps them for later and possibly a level that helps them for now as well. So I think it's certainly a possibility that if he picks things up and they feel good about it, that he does become the number 2 behind Darnold if they head into the playoffs.
This is kind of crazy because I've not been the biggest Nick Mullins supporter as the backup. I've said my preference would be you go out and even before this season began, you give yourself another option there. We've seen Mullins, he can sling it, but we also have seen why he's a backup, because he can give up the ball as often as he does. And so this is going to sound crazy coming from me, but there's a part of me that says for the immediate future, like the next 2 or 3 weeks, I almost think there's something reckless about the suggestion that Jones should be immediately promoted to number 2, because I feel like, well, you may love Daniel Jones in theory. You may love what his potential is once he goes to your rehab school, but I think you have to find out how damaged he is right now, how much work that you have to do. And I would argue it's almost unfair to the team you've put together that has a chance this Sunday to go to 10-2 to say we're immediately plugging in Daniel Jones as the number 2 quarterback. Do you see my point, or do you understand that, or do you disagree?
No, I agree with you. I think if anything were to happen along these lines, we're talking in the last week or 2 of the season. Right. I don't think there's anything that is going to rush any of it. I know a lot of it right now is just figuring out where he's at mentally. I mean, he's coming from a place that had him playing scout team safety before they cut him. I mean, there's a level of baggage, I think, that comes out of something like that they have to work through a little bit. And Nick Mullins, say what you want about him, he is the most experienced quarterback in this system in the building. And you saw it on Sunday when Sam Darnold goes out for a couple plays. They have a 3rd and 13. Nick Mullins converts it with that throw to Aaron Jones. I mean, that ability, he's done that a couple times this season, kind of to come in as the cold reliever with a runner on 1st and 2nd, so to speak, and he's come in and gotten the job done. So I think they see some value. Certainly they see value in Nick Mullins as a backup. It's been the reason he keeps coming back. I think the only way that it changes is if Jones gets to the point where his command of the offense is enough that they think he can go out and run it. I don't think that'll be a rush. But if he does look like he's somebody that understands it that well and can execute it, maybe towards playoff time that becomes an option.
Well, part of also what I'm curious about is how much time on the practice field can Jones, let's say if in theory he's number 3 or 4, at least at the start, does he get? In other words, how much time can O'Connell afford to spend with him to sort of reclaim him and redeem him in the middle of a season again where you are a very relevant team and you have aspirations, right, to make some kind of a run? That's the other part. Off season, I think it's a lot easier to see it, but how much can a number 3 quarterback? I don't even know how much time a number 2 quarterback gets during practice during the week on a given week.
Yeah, it's not much. I mean, most of those reps are going to get the starters ready to play that week's game. It's not the time to install the offense or take developmental paths with players. It's to get that game plan ready for that week with the first string offense. I think where you will see them work him in or get him some of those practice reps that he's not going to get very often is he may do a little bit of scout team stuff, but the thing I really think they'll use is they've got so many coaches on this staff. Grant Udinski, their assistant quarterbacks coach, who they rave about. I ended up writing about him a couple weeks ago just because he's got pretty crazy off-field hobbies as well. But Sam Darnold was out there doing this today, and a lot of days he's out for an extra 30, 40 minutes in practice. And you'll see a lot of these quarterbacks hang around on Friday nights, basically until they're the last people in the building. Everybody's gone home. Udinski just eats, sleeps, breathes football, doesn't have a family at home. He's single, so he's got the time to spend. He will take quarterbacks, he did this a number of times last season, through these long walkthroughs where they're basically running everything in the game plan. He's either saying, okay, I'm a defensive back, I'm a defensive end, whatever you need him to do, you get some on-field work that way. It's not the same thing as practice, certainly not the same thing as a game, but for a quarterback like Jones, who's played quite a bit in the NFL, that will be something they use, I think, to get him up to speed in this offense. The fact that they have 20-something coaches on the staff, I think one of the reasons they do that is to get some of that individualized instruction, and I expect they'll put some of that to work with him as well.
Help me understand the rules that govern this situation as well. As long as Jones is on the practice squad, I believe he can get plucked by a team that's willing to say, we're going to make him active. We may even start him. So is that true? A, is that true? And B, what kind of, you think, ramifications does that have in terms of the way, how quickly the Vikings might want to put him on the active squad to protect him?
Well, I think, yes, that is true, number one. I mean, he could be plucked by a team that decides they want to put him on the active roster. I don't know that it will force their hand immediately. I mean, they have had this thing in the last couple of weeks here where they're cutting players that have been in the organization for a while because they're just tight on roster space. I mean, it is sort of interesting to watch how they make all of these moves. I mean, today was Gabriel Murphy getting cut after he came back from injured reserve, probably to get back on the practice squad. But I say that to say there's not a ton of room on the roster right now to just stash somebody that you're not feeling like you're going to use on a Sunday. So I do expect he'll stay on the practice squad for the time being, which means that if there is another team that comes through, I think there were a number of teams that had interest in him that have had quarterback injuries this season that could come back around and say, yeah, we're bringing you to the active roster. We want you here now. We have a spot for you to play pretty quickly, or at least be active pretty quickly. So that is a risk here. I mean, I think it's one that they understand and they know is certainly a possibility depending on how it goes. But I think there's a lot of the thought process here. There's not really a downside to bring him in. If it is nothing more than a couple of weeks, I mean, the possibility of him being here long term, this sort of functions almost like an extended free agent visit, because what you're talking about is next year.
Right.
And how does he fit with coaches? How does he fit with teammates? All the medical stuff. You get a chance to do that kind of for free in a lot of ways. It's really just the cash that you're paying him, which isn't very much.
Does the player have the right to decline? In other words, if another team comes calling and says, we want you to start, the player does not have to say yes, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. I mean, if somebody were to offer him a spot, he wouldn't have to take it. And I think, that's always the question of, do you want to go play right away, or do you want to kind of take the rest of the year?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's possible it's not. It's possible somebody that's a contest says, we want you, but then you're back in that spot of, I'm going out there, I'm learning a new offense, I'm putting things on tape in games that I may not be terribly interested in showing to people when I'm building my free agency resume for next year. So I think in some ways, I mean, you talk about it kind of as a rehab center. I do think there's a little bit of that to it, where if you come in and you get some development and you aren't necessarily having people scout and evaluate all of that on a weekly basis because they see it, that may not be the worst thing in the world for him at this juncture, especially as he kind of tries to get a bad experience, or at least a bad finish in New York, out of his head, probably a little bit.
All right, we're extremely squeezed for time. Real quick, who wins on Sunday and why?
I'm picking the Vikings. I think this is one where Kyler Murray's mobility, Kyler Murray's game-breaking opportunities as a scrambler, as a guy that can throw on the run. We saw that a couple of years ago. I think that's a challenge. I think the Cardinals do a lot of things defensively that are different in where they'll put Budda Baker. There's going to be a lot of things to sort through there. But we have seen the Cardinals, when they went to Lambeau Field earlier this year, they struggled against a good offense. And I think there could be some of that on Sunday. And I just think the Vikings at home, with this defense being back at home after 3 games on the road, I like them at home in a close one. I think this could actually be a shootout. I think this could be kind of a back and forth where you're trading big plays. But I am going to take them at home. I think they have a lot of things going well for them right now, and I think that'll be enough to get them through what should be probably a pretty entertaining game before Kirk Cousins comes back to town in a week.
That's it. It's right around the corner now. Happy holidays to you and yours, and we will chat next week. Thank you, Ben.
Sounds good, Dan. Happy Thanksgiving as well for you and Guardsy, and we'll talk next week. Ben Gessling covers the Vikings for the Star Tribune and StarTribune.com, brought to you by Standard Heating and Air. We'll come back to wrap up the show. Wrap up the show at 5:17? Well, yes. We'll explain why next.
Show Wrap is brought to you by American Pressure, commercial-grade pressure washers since 1975.
It's the bumper-to-bumper Show Wrap.
Did you have this on your bingo card? Apparently, the Vikings, with the Daniel Jones acquisition, are now tied for the most Joneses in the league.
Really?
Aaron, Daniel, I don't even know how to pronounce it. Jeshawn Jones.
Sounds right.
Patrick Jones II and Durante Jones, coach. For the record, according to Dustin Baker, the Cardinals have 5 Joneses as well. So there will be 10 Joneses associated with Vikings Cardinals on Sunday at high noon. Who knew?
It's a holiday weekend. Get the family together.
Yes, it makes all the sense Joneses in the world. Music is early today because we got a lot of programming to get into tonight. Vikings X's and O's will follow us at the bottom of this hour on this Thanksgiving Eve. And then it's Minnesota Wild back in action against the Sabres. Timberwolves action, they're back. Guardsy's going. Sacramento Kings at Target Center. And that game will be available to you via the Timberwolves channel on the iHeart Radio app, which, as we've said before, is free, and free. A very drunken Carl Gerbschmidt joined us at 3:30. That will be podcastable, presumably later tonight if you missed it. In addition, Glen Mason, I thought, was very sharp and on point today. He even managed to get a Joe Mauer cheap shot in late. I did not have that on my Glen Mason bingo card for tonight. And lastly, Ben Gessling helping us understand the ramifications of the Daniel Jones acquisition. He's supposed to hit town on Friday. Where is he from? He went to Duke, right?
Yes.
Where is he from? Do you remember where
his
Daniel
original
Jones is from
hometown.
for whatever reason?
I still haven't pulled up. I'll find it by the
I
end
don't
of
know.
the
I
show
guess
here.
it's really not that earth-shattering. I'm not sure. In any case,
He's from Charlotte.
Charlotte, North
He
Carolina.
was born in Charlotte.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So he's on his way, presumably not to
After
be
Thanksgiving.
the backup for this. After Thanksgiving, for this game on Sunday against the Arizona Cardinals. A couple people have asked what our schedule is. Tomorrow, it's Thanksgiving. We're off. Friday is a best of day, correct?
After Black Friday football.
Oh, that's right.
The Power Trip Live 7 to 9 for Mall of America.
That's
on
right.
Black Friday.
Of course.
Gophers 9 to whenever.
All right.
And then some best of
Some
Barrero.
best of. And then
The Wolves play the Clippers on Friday night as well, right here on the Fan.
Sunday, I do have a 1-hour edition of sermons. Vikings foot. You're not doing Gopher Football Sunday, is
Not
that correct?
this week,
This
no.
is it. So we will have a review on sermons of Gophers, Badgers, and one more preview and of the Vikings game. And I'm guessing some more Wolves conversation and perhaps some Wild as well. That is Sunday morning. We hope you join us then. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving holiday. We'll talk on Sunday.